My wife had a suspicion. She caught my eyes on my mother-in-law during a family celebration. She nudged me in the side. "Why are you looking at my mom?" she asked. "You're making it up," I replied, quickly shifting my gaze to someone else. My mother-in-law was quite popular, especially with the men. All eyes were fixed on her. She was dressed to impress, a tight dress that emphasized her deep cleavage. It looked like the dress was about to burst at the seams. Not many dresses could handle the large size of my mother-in-law's breasts. She was undoubtedly a stunning woman. In her younger years, there were rumors of her wild adventures and numerous suitors. My wife told me these stories, but I never believed them. However, my imagination began to run wild. We saw my mother-in-law infrequently, only during family holidays. The rest of the time, we relied on phone calls to stay in touch. She didn't interfere in our lives, but that evening, my mother-in-law was on fire. Her large gold earrings jiggled. She couldn't sit still for a minute. The other aunts were silent, including my wife. Compared to my aunt, she was a pale shadow. She was neither seen nor heard. She didn't utter a word. This is not my wife. I put down some salad and looked at my mother-in-law again. She seemed to sense that I was paying attention to her. She burst out laughing, which got even louder as she playfully jiggled her breasts. It was as if she had returned to her youth, radiating carefree and vibrant energy. Surprisingly, she looked no more than 45 years old, when in fact she was 60. As for me, I am a little over 40, and I feel utterly exhausted by married life. The mere thought of a wife causes me indescribable frustration. It's been years since I've even touched her, and to tell you the truth, I have no desire to. I have no motivation to force myself into any kind of intimacy. Instead, my eyes wander to other women. I'm always on the lookout. I make attempts, successful or not, to form relationships with them. By the way, I am rarely wrong in my quest. When it comes to my wife, however, I find myself at a loss. She once seemed intriguing and alluring to me, with her cheerful disposition and voluptuous figure. But that was a long time ago. I haven't met any women like that lately. I mostly meet middle-aged women. If I meet a young woman, I wish myself victory and try to win her. Young women, as a rule, are less demanding and do not have a lot of life experience, so they are easier to deceive. I can't get rid of the feeling of curiosity and anxiety, wondering how my mother-in-law behaves in love affairs. What can she afford, and what can she not? Is she a good kisser? And in general, what does she look like in her natural state, so to speak? I stared at her, stared, and my wife shoved me in the side again. "Have some decency. What are you staring at?" "Leave me alone," I replied, hoping she would stop bugging me. "Isn't it any of your business who I stare at?" "I forgot to ask." "You should just be quiet, like you usually do, and eat your salad." The guests began to dance vigorously. Even my mother-in-law joined in. Even though she was a large woman, she didn't seem amused by this. I even felt like putting my hand on her waist. I realized I felt a burning sensation in my pants from what I was seeing. I needed to come up with a plan. My thoughts were racing at breakneck speed. How could I get her outside? What excuse could I use? It was cold outside. I have vivid memories of my mother-in-law's love of automobiles. She knows more about them than anyone I know. This gave me a stray thought. After waiting about 5 minutes, I couldn't hold back any longer and blabbed. "Mother-in-law," I said, "I need your expertise. My car's engine is making a knocking noise. Would you mind taking a look at it? Maybe you can advise me on something." At that moment, my wife was not around. She had gone into the other room with a disgruntled expression on her face. As if it was my fault that she had a strained relationship with her mother-in-law, who looked shy and beautiful. After pondering for a while, the mother-in-law agreed. "All right, let's go. It will be a chance to get some clean air. It's getting stuffy in here. None of the guests suspected anything amiss. Everyone knew my mother-in-law knew about cars, which is rare for a woman. She got up from the table, and I could hardly contain my impatience. I wanted to urge her to hurry up, but I held back through gritted teeth. We walked out into the yard and went to my car. I opened the door and invited my mother-in-law inside. She hesitated, not really wanting to do it, but by the glint in her eyes I realized that she understood perfectly well. Gesturing for her to sit in the passenger seat, my mother-in-law adjusted her dress and squeezed into the seat. I followed suit and started the engine, finding that there was no problem. The mother-in-law looked at me in surprise and exclaimed, "Everything is perfectly fine." I replied, "No, not everything." "What do you mean?" Mother-in-law asked, confused. "Well," I explained, "I mean that I appreciate you as a woman." "Oh dear, that's why I found an excuse to get you away from your guests. I wanted to be frank with you. A lot of people appreciate candor." My mother-in-law blushed, lowered her eyes, and adjusted the neckline of her dress. She glanced at me, but quickly averted her gaze. I gently stroked her knee, then the other. "I reached for the neckline, but we might be seen," she whispered softly, letting me undo the top button. Confidently, I moved on to the second button. "Don't worry, no one will see us. The windows are tinted." She nodded and let me touch the most prominent part of her body. I let out a sharp exclamation. It was uncomfortable, but that's what was exciting. When you feel the excitement, even if there's no actual chase, the anticipation makes everything inside you tremble. My mother-in-law turned out to be a wise and experienced woman. She didn't make any unnecessary moves. Everything was clear and calculated. I saw in her a wealth of experience. So my wife was right. My mother-in-law had already encountered many men. There was no shyness or modesty in her. I admired that. I don't like it when women hesitate to act. They are embarrassed and say they can't do this and that. It was different with my mother-in-law. She knew exactly what to do. She let me do what I wanted to do and never once scolded me. I got out of the car first, stretched, and looked at the windows. No one was peeking at us from behind the closed curtains. Everyone was having a great time. My mother-in-law followed me out, swaying her hips gracefully. She had reignited the spark in me. We didn't give in to temptation, however, and didn't go back to the car. Instead, we headed for the house. To my surprise, my wife was waiting for us there. "Where did you disappear to?" She asked. "I searched the whole house looking for you. I even looked in the bathroom." I grinned to myself, thinking what a stupid mistake she had made. I quickly made an excuse, telling her that we were just listening to the car engine because it was making strange noises. My wife looked at me with an angry look. She had never understood anything about cars, and that was fine with me. "So you found the problem?" she asked. "Yes, we found it," I replied. I couldn't get it into my head that the real problem was her. At this point, my mother-in-law joined our conversation and suggested we look at the motor tomorrow. "I'm a little busy right now. Would you mind coming to my work tomorrow at lunchtime?" I was about to burst with happiness. Oh my God. She seems to have loosened up too, and she's enjoying it. That's great. It shows she's starting to get the hang of it. I could say the same thing about me. There's so much we haven't tried yet. "Thank you," I said, and went to mingle with the guests. I couldn't believe that I had put up with all this for so many years, doing the boring family routine. If I had known earlier that my mother-in-law was so good, I would have left my wife long ago and gone to her. I couldn't wait for tomorrow. I acted like a young guy who has his first date with a girl tomorrow. I felt young, and in a good mood, I drove home with my wife.